in 2026, I'm going to be turning 75. So I decided to make a video about what life was like for me growing up, starting in 1951 when I was born, because things obviously were a lot different back then. My mother was 14 years old when the war started, and my father would have been, 5 years older. And then my mother joined the ATS, and my father was in the Royal Navy from the age of 17 when the war started. And they met in a place called the Stage Door. I think that's the place where Glenn Miller made his last performance. Anyway, they got married and they moved to a little village in Kent called Chollock. We had a tiny house there with a white painted front and apple trees and pear trees and a big garden with every kind of fruit you can think of. And my dad used to grow sweet corn, peas, because my sister and I, Helen, we used to shell the peas in the garden. We had raspberries, strawberries, we had everything in our garden, even damsons. And our granny lived with us, which was quite usual in those days. And my father was in the Navy, as I said, and he went away for quite a long time, like 2 years at a time, on cruises, which must have been nice for him, but not so nice for my mother. We didn't have electricity in the house. It was lit by funny little white gas wicks that were high up on the wall, and my mum used to light one at night time in our nursery, and we had to go to sleep when it went out. It looked like a cone. We also had a big cesspit in the garden, which my dad used to dig every couple of years, and I don't know what he did with it, but I remember him digging it out. And he filled it with all sorts of things. I really don't know what was going on, but anyway. My mother had to wash nappies by hand. Toweling nappies. There was no such thing as disposable nappies back then. So, when she had 3 children under the age of 5, I was the middle one at the time, and I wore nappies until I was about 4, which is a bit disgusting of me. So I think I've always been lazy. So she used to wash these nappies by hand, and the house used to smell of ammonia. I can remember that smell to this day. And she had to hang them out on the line, and sometimes in the winter they were frozen solid like stiff boards. So that was my life back then. It was lovely. My sister Helen, who was 2 years older than me, and my sister Barbara, who's 2 years younger, we ran pretty much wild. We could go anywhere. We went for long walks down the lanes. At that age, sort of 2.5, 5 and 7.5, we had so much freedom, probably too much. But my mother had a lot on her hands with the 3 of us. Anyway, my father came back and my mother got pregnant again. So because she was pregnant and she already had 3 children to look after, Helen and I got sent to boarding school. And I was, 9 when I first went, and I didn't like it. It wasn't very nice not having anyone there who cared about just you in particular. Helen was more academic than me, and she settled in very well. Our boarding school was called Foss Bank, and it was the school was in Tunbridge, and the actual house where the boarders lived was called Bidborough Court, and it was about a mile away, and we used to go down to the school on a coach every morning and come back in the evening on the coach. Well, once I got used to it, I quite liked it. I mean, we pretty much ran wild there too. It was lovely. I made quite a lot of friends, and people from all over the world were there. But for some reason, when I got to the age of, I think it was 12, our mother decided that we were running too wild, and she sent us to a convent boarding school, which was awful. It was called Les Oiseaux, and it was in Westgate-on-Sea, Kent. And obviously it was all girls, but the whole building was surrounded by a wall with broken glass on the top. And we went into that school at the beginning of term, and we did not leave it until the end of term. And the only man we ever saw was the priest waving the incense at Mass at flipping 7 o'clock in the morning before breakfast, which, well, I think was unreasonable. The food was very nice there, though, especially on feast days. Anyway, we moved at that time to a fantastic old vicarage in a village called Sheldwich. When we first saw the vicarage, it was called Sheldon House. It's now apparently been split up and made into a spa and all sorts of other things. But we owned the whole building and some of the woods. And that was a lovely place to live. It was rambling. When we first went there, the old vicar called Eric Marsh, he had let his geese run wild through the building, and all the floors were covered in goose poo, which obviously got scraped off, but I think that's how they got the house at such a cheap price. I think they paid something like £800 for it, and it was on, the main part of the building was on 3 floors, and there was an extended wing on 2 floors, and we had a pond, and it was lovely. And we pretty much ran wild there too, in the school holidays. My little sister Fiona was born and brought to that house, and we were still at boarding school at the time, and it was pretty good until 1963, when my father got the job. He was a lieutenant commander at the time. He got the job in Chester to be the chief careers officer for Northern Ireland and the whole of England. So we were going to move up to Chester. No, his job wasn't in Chester, his job was in Liverpool, sorry. But we moved to Chester and into a lovely house there. Not as big as the one we'd come from, but it was still quite big. It was nice. I had my own bedroom on the top floor with a bathroom, which was quite unusual in those days. And my mother gave me a studio. I think she was trying to keep me out of the way, to be honest, because I was a bit of a pest. Anyway, I went to school at a school called Love Street, which was a public school. Is that a state school? For about 3 terms. And people took the piss out of me there because I think I was too well spoken or something stupid like that. It's like inverted snobbery. Anyway, it wasn't very good. So my mother decided to tell the women at the nuns at the convent that I wanted to become Catholic. Well, she didn't ask me, she just told them that. And she told them that my sister wanted to become Catholic, that was Helen. So they accepted us to the school because you had to be Catholic to go there. And I had lessons from a lovely nun called Sister Vianney, and I became Catholic, much to my... I didn't really take it on board, to be honest. I think I went to confession a couple of times, but I hadn't got much to confess in those days, not really. And after that, I went to art school in Chester. Well, I say I went to art school, I was virtually never there. I had a really lovely boyfriend called David Ashcroft, and we went out for 2 years, and we spent most of our time hitchhiking to Liverpool to the Walker Art Gallery, where we'd sit on the steps outside and drink whatever we could find to drink and smoke. I didn't really smoke, but I used to give it a little puff. And that was my 2 years at art school. Now, looking back, I totally wasted the time. I should have really paid attention because, to be quite honest, art school was absolutely, it was brilliant in those days. I got my A-level art there, which really wasn't much use to me. And I was pretty much still running wild. So when I was 17, my mum said to me, if you carry on like this much longer, Sally, I'm not going to be very happy. So I managed to get to probably nearly 18, and she said to me, "You're not doing that in my house." I can't remember what it was. So I said, "Okay, I'll leave." And I got myself my first bedsit. In those days, you could find somewhere to rent really easily. Now, my bedsit cost me £3 a week, which was half my wages, because I had a job in a shop called Thingamies in Chester on the Rose, 34 Watergate Street it was. And my rent was, as I say, half my wages, and I had a phrase of being anorexic as well, which was they didn't have a label for it in those days. For some reason, I just didn't eat. I had a lovely boyfriend called Stephen Hardacre, and we decided to live together, which wasn't something you did in those days. You really didn't live together. It was looked down on. But, you were a tart. so I was a tart then. Anyway, I went out, I lived with him for a couple of years, and we had a fantastic time. The person I was working for, Alan Brown, he had been in Liverpool Art School with his wife Susan. Susan had been engaged to Pete Best, who was one of the first Beatles, and Mike, who was Paul McCartney's brother, used to come to the shop a lot, and the guy Alan Brown, who ran the shop, he had been at art school with Terence Conran, and Alan started his shop at the same time as Terence Conran started Habitat, but obviously Habitat took off and Thingamies didn't really, but it was very nice. We used to sit in the shop feeling very superior to everyone because we knew all about design and we were all cool and they weren't. But that's the way things went then. Anyway, my boyfriend, Stephen Hardacre, started seeing somebody else, a friend of mine actually called Diane. So I was a bit heartbroken because having left my house, my home, my mother's home, she had filled the whole room up with furniture and more or less I wasn't welcome to go home. So Steve was going off with this girl, Diane, and I didn't know what to do. So, like joining the French Foreign Legion, I decided to go as an au pair to Switzerland. So off I tropped to Switzerland, to a place called Lutry, near Lausanne, where I stayed for nearly a year. And I spoke a bit of French there, which was good. It was a lovely place to be. I think I was a bit too lazy for them though. I earned £5 a month there, and I used to spend it on Coca-Cola and French chocolate, not French chocolate, Swiss chocolate. Yeah. Lutry was a beautiful place, and the house was called Chemin de Murat, and it looked down onto Lake Geneva, and there were, all the way down the hill, it was right at the top of a big hill, all the way down the hill were grapevines, and I remember a festival that went through Lutry where there was a cart pulled by horses and men in the back stamping on grapes and crushing them. I thought, ooh, you don't want to drink the wine after that, but there you go. Stephen Hardacre sent me a telegram to Switzerland which said, I love you, come back, please marry me. So I thought, oh, go on then. It's a bit stupid. I never really thought ahead in those days. Also, being a bit of a cow, I wanted to get my own back on Diane, who he'd gone off with. So I came back and married him, which was, I mean, we were friends, but it was pretty much a disaster. We only stayed together 10 months, and I buzzed off to a squat in Manchester. I left Steve Hardacre. I had an Indian bedspread and a few clothes, and that was it. And it was wonderful. In those days, as I say, you really could move about, find a job, get yourself going, and, So I got myself a job in Kendal Mills in Manchester. Well, it was working for a firm called Dinasco, based in London. I was introduced by a guy called David Featherby, and he got me the position, and I was the manageress of the concessionary, and I had what seemed to be, excuse me, it seemed to be a massive wage, which was, what was it, £20 a week, a month? It must have been a week, which was a lot of money in those days. And in Manchester at the time, well, I lived in Macclesfield. I used to get the train up to Kendal Mills, Sorry, it's my age catching up with me here. Yes, I used to get the train up there. And one of the people who used to come into the store was Lulu. She was very funny. I've been up in the lift a few times with her, and she was always singing. A bit embarrassing, really, because what you're supposed to do when somebody next to you is singing at the top of their voices. I stayed in Manchester at the store for, I think, about a year and a half. And then David Featherby said to me, "Do you want to move to London?" I thought, wow, yes, London, I'd love to go there. My sister Helen was living there. So David and I moved together to London. We went to Holland Park, and we had I suppose it was a townhouse, a little Mews townhouse there, which I really liked. He had tried to get me to buy myself a house in Macclesfield, because you could buy a house for £1,000 in Macclesfield at the time, a terraced house. And that was my year's wages would have covered it. And I thought he was trying to get rid of me, so I didn't. I thought, no, I shall stay with you. You are doomed. Anyway, in London, what did I do? What did I do in London? I can't remember. Not a lot, probably. I did quite a lot of artwork for a firm called Kaleidoscope, and eventually became their designer. If you care to Google it, Sally Gregory I was at the time. If you care to Google it, there are flan dishes, mugs, tea towels, greetings cards, posters, things I did at the time. And also I had some work in the design centre in London, which was nice. This was all because of David Featherby's connections, really, rather than me being anything particularly special. After a while, we moved to Richmond in Surrey, and I met my next future husband, called Will, in Richmond Town Squash Club. We got married in 1976 and had 2 children, Caroline and Nicholas, which was lovely. Sadly, that marriage didn't last either, and probably my fault, I don't know. Anyway, I was then a single mother, and I was determined that I was not going to live on benefit, and I became a children's book designer. I should say illustrator, for Hodder and Stoughton. I wrote a book called In Search of Misty Mill, which I also illustrated, and I illustrated quite a lot of Enid Blyton books for a company called Award Publications, I should say. And also, I know, the book I did for Rod Hull, called The Reluctant Poet. Rod Hull was quite funny. I went to his house with my publisher a few times. Great big old mansion he had, and it was falling apart, but he actually had another one that he was doing up, which was going to be his main house with his lovely children. And he had a lovely little boy. I can't remember his name now. I remembered it for years, but I suppose being nearly 75, I'm losing my memory. This little lad, he made me a cup of tea. He was gorgeous. I really took to him. Anyway, my illustrating work took off quite well, and I was earning quite a lot of money, until such time as I was paying so much money to the childminders in the school holidays that it just came to a point when I had to quit. And blow me if I didn't end up on benefits. I moved with Caroline and Nicholas to a council estate in Twickenham, and there I met the most wonderful man I've ever met, my present husband, called Steve. And we got married when I was 40, and had our son Joel when I was 41. And there you go. We stayed in Twickenham for until the early 2000s, and then we moved to Devon, where we are now. I haven't done a lot since then. We opened an antiques and collectibles shop, which lasted a couple of years, and that's about it. So, the life and times of an old bat, that's about it, really. I suppose I could have put more detail in, but I'm rambling, so there you go. Thank you for listening. If you stayed with me this long, my goodness, you're a sticker, aren't you? A stayer, I should say. Thank you, you're appreciated. And if you could like, share and comment, that would be even better, because Steve and I are pensioners, obviously, and the state pension is a load of crap and it doesn't go very far, and I'm trying to get monetised, and it's taken me this long to get 696 followers. I'm also doing a Facebook page called Little Pics by S.J. Davis, where I make various little videos. I've got to try and get monetised and up the money a bit, because 2-tier Starmer is a pain in the arse, and our pension is pathetic. And we're going to have to sell this house and go somewhere else to free up some money. I don't know. But such is life. Thank you for listening. Bye.